Former President Donald J. Trump. About Pennsylvania. Now, former President Trump will win the state of Pennsylvania, and we can make that call, the 19 electoral votes. That puts him at 267, not officially over the 270, but the path that it takes to get to 270, he is well on his way to becoming the 47th president of the United States in what is going to be the biggest political phoenix from the ashes story that we have.
Cleveland was not the subject of a Russia investigation, 2 impeachments, 2 assassination attempts. They have indictments, 91 indictments, convictions, and there is almost nothing that hasn't been thrown at this former president. And his tenacity in wanting to go back and run again, which he announced immediately after he lost in 2020. This is a huge, historic moment in the United States of America as the former President Trump is closing in with just a few electoral votes away now from clinching 270 as Pennsylvania is called for Donald Trump.
We're looking live, 1:21 a.m. in the morning at Trump headquarters, and the cheers coming up. We're told the former president is there, as well as J.D. Vance, Senator J.D. Vance. They are getting ready to hear from former President Donald Trump. Again, at 267, not there yet, but looking at where that vote is in Wisconsin, where the vote is in Michigan, where the vote is in Nevada and in Arizona, where the vote is in Michigan, where the vote is in Nevada and in Arizona. There is no path, Brit Hume, for Vice President Harris, and just 30,000 feet, what this means.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Richard Nixon was declared dead in 1962. Remember the famous speech he said, "You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore." No one could imagine after that failed race for governor that he could have come back in 1968 and been elected president. That was a hell of a comeback. This, to my eye, was a man who was faced with many more slings and arrows than Nixon had been at that time, hated though he was by the Democrats. This surmounts that. This is an extraordinary comeback.
Dana.
He campaigned so energetically, ruthlessly, fiercely, and with more joy than Kamala Harris. And it was so clear that Joe Biden was not going to be able to go the distance. If Joe Biden were still on the ticket tonight, who knows what tonight might have even looked like, that he has been able to accomplish this, it is nothing short of astonishing and amazing. And also I think about Susie Wiles, who's his campaign manager, very quiet, does not like the limelight. Chris LaCivita, who works on it. All of those people who worked so hard and stuck by Trump, no matter what was said about him, they were called every name in the book, including Hitler and Nazis, and they came through. The other thing that's on my mind is, you know, last night at her closing rally, Oprah Winfrey said that if Donald Trump is elected again, basically you can just write America off, like America's just going to fall apart. That's obviously not true, although I'll be surprised tomorrow if there's a big line at JFK of Hollywood celebrities leaving the country, as I said they were going to. This is the greatest country, and there will be so many opportunities for lots of deal making. I think President Trump will be in the mood, but he also has a huge to-do list. Biden and Harris have left a mess. His closing argument was, she broke it, I will fix it. And she talked about having a to-do list. He's got a big to-do list, but he thrives on it. And you saw that through the whole campaign.
He is, I think, enthusiastic about doing the job of being President, Harold, and it is just an absolutely remarkable. I think if you wrote this as a movie script, people would say this could never happen in the United States of America.
He's a single, I've said this before, he's the single greatest political athlete I've ever seen. And tonight he proved why. I said some things and did some things that I didn't quite understand, that I thought maybe detracted from that, but tonight obviously proves that too. He also ran a traditional campaign. He connected with voters on issues. He talked about the things that mattered most to voters, and Democrats said he didn't talk about it in the most full-throated way, he didn't talk about it in the most wholesome way, didn't talk about it in the most wholesome way, didn't talk about it in the most comprehensive way, but he connected with voters. I would let us not be critical of people for voting for President Trump. He did something clear here shortly once Alaska comes in. Don't write off the American people. Let us not be critical of people for voting for President Trump. He did something we didn't do in this campaign. We had to reevaluate, reassess. Mr. Wonderful said it a little earlier that may give us an opportunity as a party to revamp, and perhaps we should think about that. But don't write off the people, the American people, for the decision they made this evening.
Charlie Hurt, he will be the 47th president of the United States after everything that we saw in this election. It's hard to understand how some in the mainstream media are going to take this, because it was so over the top one way that they thought it was done. There was a landslide prediction from a lot in the media that she was going to have the landslide. It looks like he's going to have the landslide tonight.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. You know, the revolution rolls on, and this is not just a victory for the White House tonight, but also, this is the end of the old Republican Party, which, of course, Donald Trump took on. That was the first thing that he did. The very first thing that he did in 2015 was take on the old Republican Party. He has completely reshaped the Republican Party. The Republican Party is no longer doesn't stand for a lot of the things that it stood for before. He has made it a far more middle class, working class, a far more practical party, I think probably a far more durable party, and he's figured out how to win with that. And you can't help but think that with this victory, in 4 years from now, he's going to have the mantle that he can hand to the next Republican. So I don't know how Republicans ever go back to the old party that they were, but it is truly extraordinary, and it is all by the force of one guy, one man who had the fortitude, the strength, the vision, the refusal to accept anything, all of the experts counting him out, and he just kept on fighting and fighting and fighting.
Charlie, it would have been one thing for him to come back from a single defeat, to be elected again. But when you think about it, he came back from a series of them. I mean, his party lost in the midterm when his term.
2018.
They lost in 2018. They lost the presidential election in 2020, and they had a major disappointment in 2022. Which one might have thought after all that the party wouldn't turn to him again, and yet in the face of that, plus all the things that Martha enumerated, the indictments, all the other troubles that he had, for him to come back from that is really quite.
And think about how toxic he was after, say, January 6th.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at races now in states where Donald Trump very well may drag Republicans, and he's overperforming in a lot of places fellow Republicans.
It really does. I think there are parallels to 1980, Mark Penn. When you look at Jimmy Carter, we had hostages in Iran. We have hostages in Gaza right now. Very high inflation and a malaise in many ways in the country that I think these people who have been called a lot of names have had enough of. What is your impression of what this means tonight?
Well, I think this means a lot to a lot of people. I think the working class are looking for a renewal of American jobs. I think people are looking for a border that is sane and an immigration system that works. I think a lot of people over in the Middle East are looking for Iran to pull back in the face of a president whom they fear. And, look, I think it's going to be incumbent on the Democratic Party to understand that the people have spoken and to dissemble and dismantle this lawfare system that they have built up here, which is going to raise a whole series of questions that are going to have to be answered now. But they cannot say that they are better than Donald Trump and recreate a system that does not recognize that he won and the people have spoken, and he is going to be the 47th president.
We haven't talked about foreign policy a lot, but imagine the Saudis, making a normalization deal with Israel in the face of a new president here.
I'm going there tomorrow night.
Imagine a Ukraine
there
deal
last week.
that Donald Trump talks about. Kevin O'Leary, what is the market going to do in the
You're
wake
going to
of
love
this?
this. What's happened here is the system self-corrected. When you try and break the American model, it fixes itself. And I think people should give credit within the Democratic Party. Donald Trump saved them tonight, too, because they're going to have to take a spatula to these policies and bring it back to the center over the next 4 years and, in a way, reset. And we talked about this earlier, but he saved entrepreneurship. He saved the entire model of the S&P 500 because taxing 20% higher was a really bad idea, and it self-corrected. Capital, and this is why I'm getting on a plane tomorrow night. I intentionally didn't leave till tomorrow night so I could go to Geneva, go to Abu Dhabi, go to Riyadh, and say it's 21% corporate taxes, 100% not going to change. That is very important for people like me that bring capital back to this country. It fixed itself. It fixed itself. And I think that's why America works. It has worked for 200 years. When it gets too crazy, it fixes itself. And whether you love Trump or you hate him, every Democrat owes him a thank you very much, Mr. President.
By the way, as the markets, the poly market and all these election markets were moving, Bitcoin went up exponentially.
Yes, I'm long Bitcoin.
Are you?
Good for you.
So you're buying later.
You know, speaking of Bitcoin, I'm also struck by just calling Pennsylvania here, Dana. Trump embraced Elon Musk in an enormous way. A lot of stories were written that said that he was going to blow it in Pennsylvania, that the people who were working on his outreach teams didn't know what they were doing. He's going to.
And he got a lot of criticism. Remember the $1 million giveaway for registered voters?
But of course for that.
Selena Zito, who's somebody that we follow and we've had on the show many times, and she knows that area very well. She said the people of that region love somebody who is a big thinker, who wants to create jobs, who is like looking into the future, and they can get behind that. And they love somebody who can really lead. And leadership takes courage. And you have to be willing to make decisions where you are going to be criticized. I think this is one of the problems that Kamala Harris has always had. She doesn't want to take a position on anything. We haven't even talked about how in California, the law to basically make shoplifting illegal again passed overwhelmingly. Yeah. And Gascon, our friend down, the DA in Los Angeles, lost by 22 votes. I mean, this is in California, so it was everywhere.
22 points.
And 2 days before, 22 points, thank you. She wouldn't even take a position on that. 75% of the people in California wanted it gone, and you can't take a position to be with them?
Not only that, you were part of Prop 47, which changed the law the other way when you were in office.
So not wanting to take a position and not being willing to be criticized is a problem if you want to be a leader at that level.
She had that affliction in 2020. Why didn't her own party say, you're not the right candidate? I mean, run a process.
Well, they did. They ran her out of town right before any votes were cast in 2019.
But the same affliction
out of there.
Hit her here. The same problem she had in 2020 hit her in 2024.
She's the same person.
I mean, it's not all her fault. They put her in a race that she, well, we now know couldn't win.
Yeah.
But Karen, in fairness to Democrats, there's no doubt. I agree with you on the unrealized capital gains. We shouldn't be taxing that. But we produce more wealth, more innovation, more oil, more cures, more therapeutics over the last 3 years. So I hear you. Democrats are not bad for the economy. Some things she proposed that I'm with you on. But we're a great country, and we're going to continue to be great. And I trust and hope and believe that President
Your party will be great again.
I want the
and you can thank Donald Trump for that.
But he inherited an economy also that was in pretty good shape. I don't want to quarrel about that. All I want is going forward. I agree with you. I want the country to be great, and I hope that both of the parties can work together to try and do that. And I salute President Trump tonight. What a great win, and I agree with you in this regard. My party's got to reimagine and reinvent itself going forward.
Your party needs more of you.
Hold on. I wrote about this, the unity and
you did.
Past presidents and past losers and winners and what they said. This is a big speech, Britt, for former President Trump. As he gets ready to deliver this in front of a crowd, he's obviously taken the slings and arrows and everything that's been said, the fascism, all of the things we've talked about tonight. But this moment is actually a moment to to reach out.
It's an opportunity if he chooses to do that, but it's also 1:30 in the morning. So you got to wonder how many people are alive to hear.
Oh, they're there.
Yeah,
and he's definitely
His
A lot
there.
of
audience is
people are
there,
still
but
up.
The question is how much of the national TV audience is.
I bet they're still in.
You know, I think back at the moment in Iowa at the beginning of this process, Brett, when we were in a town hall with him, bless you, Brett, and he, you know, we asked him about all of this revenge stuff and that he was going to want retribution, and this is what everyone heard. And there were times when he had language that was that matched that, but he said that he wanted success to be his revenge, and that he wanted a successful America. And I would imagine that we're going to hear something along those lines tonight, but we'll see.
Brett, you wrote in your piece, you quoted one of those great old Republican presidents, H.W. Bush, who said that a campaign is a disagreement and an election is a decision. And decisions clear the way for harmony and peace.
You know,
Maybe
Listen, there are a lot of Thanksgiving tables that people are still going to have hard feelings after this election, more than any other election.
I have one of them.
And if you
Yeah.
passing the Brussels sprouts is not going to be as easy Thanksgiving Day. But this is a chance to move forward, Brett. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that one thing that can happen here, and it happened to Biden, in my view. When Biden was elected, we had every reason to believe that he would be this sort of moderate deal-making guy that he'd been when he was in the Senate. Yes, he's always followed sort of the drift of his party, but he'd worked across the aisle with many senators, had Republican friends and so on. We thought that would probably be the kind of president he was. And then something happened. Trump went to Georgia and made a mess of that Senate, those two Senate races down there, and the Democrats ended up with control of the Senate, at which point old Biden started getting these hysterical sugar plums dancing in his head and went out for a very aggressive agenda.
Sure, there were articles about FDR. How he was going to be the next FDR.
The next FDR. He was going to out-Obama. Remember that?
Yep.
Well, and that, in my view, that was he would have been, if the Republicans had maintained control of the Senate, first thing that wouldn't have happened was all that wild spending that led to the inflation, or led to a big part of the inflation. And Biden and the country would have been better off because of it. There's always a danger in overreading your mandate. One wonders if Trump will be sober-minded about his.
I think that happened to Biden. Early on, remember, he said he's going to be returned to norms, and then the historians came in and said, no, you could be bigger than FDR. So he says, fine, okay, I'll spend all the money. Then they caused inflation, and now they end up with this result.
Well, he has said that this looks like new President Trump, if he gets to 270, which we expect he will, fairly shortly. Yes, exactly. Has a moment to bring about the unity that people expected after the last election. Of course, we would be kidding ourselves to think that there won't be a tremendous response to this, tremendous backlash in a lot of corners of the country. So
listen, he's going to get there because Alaska is going to be Republican, but we're not done as far as calling states. There could be even more states that go Trump's way. This could be a massive landslide just by what we're looking at in the polls. Fox News Decision Desk can now project, though, Vice President Harris will win Minnesota, and her running mate Tim Walz serves as the state's governor there. That takes it up to 267 to 226. But again, Donald J. Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. More Democracy 24 special coverage next.
If you have generalized myasthenia gravis, picture what life could look like with Vyvgart Hytrulo, a subcutaneous injection that takes about 30 to 90
in West Palm Beach. You see thousands of people waiting, and we are about to hear from the next president of the United States. He will be 45 and 47, and we're waiting for him to join the room. We'll take you there, obviously, as soon as that gets underway.